All right, let's dive into something pretty incredible. Imagine a song so powerful, so sharp, that it's actually written to celebrate the downfall of the world's biggest superpower. Well, that's exactly what we're looking at today from the book of Isaiah. This isn't just any old text, it's what's called a proverb, or really a taunt song, and it's aimed squarely at a fallen king. We're going to break this thing down verse by powerful verse from Isaiah chapter 14. So right from the get-go, verse 4 just throws us into the deep end. There's no slow build-up, no gentle introduction. Bam! It's this raw cry of just pure astonishment and relief. I mean, you have to picture it. A world completely dominated by this one single ruthless power. And then just like that, it's over. That's the scene we're dropped into. The shocking, immediate aftermath of an empire's total collapse.
And you gotta get the context for this to really land. This isn't some dry historical report. No. What the prophet Isaiah is doing here is basically handing the newly freed people of Judah the lyrics to a victory song. But it's more than that. It's a taunt. It's this incredibly powerful piece of poetry designed specifically to mock their former captors and celebrate the end of their long, brutal bondage.
Okay, so you hear this phrase, the Golden City, and you might wonder, where does that come from? Well, it's not just some random poetic nickname. It's actually a direct callback to a super famous vision from the book of Daniel. In that dream, the whole Babylonian Empire was represented by a head of pure gold. And that image? It just perfectly captured its incredible wealth and its shiny, powerful image to the rest of the world.
And here's another really crucial point. This taunt song isn't just aimed at one guy. We might immediately think of a big name like Nebuchadnezzar, but it's bigger than that. The target here is the entire Babylonian dynasty, the whole institution of the throne. A dynasty, by the way, that ended in the most dramatic way possible with its very last king, Belshazzar, on that famous night he saw the writing on the wall.
To really feel the shock of Babylon's fall, you have to understand what this place was. According to the ancient historian Herodotus, the city walls were, get this, 336 feet high. To put that in perspective, that's taller than a modern 30-story building. And they weren't just tall, they were so wide you could apparently race 4 chariots side by side on top of them. This place was engineered to be literally unconquerable, which is what makes its sudden overnight capture by Cyrus the Great so absolutely stunning.
All right, moving on to verse 5. This just builds on that sense of total collapse, but listen to the language. It's so absolute, so final. It doesn't say the staff is, bent or the scepter is maybe a little cracked. No, it says they are broken. That's not just a military defeat, folks. That's the definitive, irreversible end of their power. Game over.
And we have to remember, these weren't just fancy sticks. The staff and the scepter were the ultimate symbols of a king's authority. They represented their very right to rule. So to say they're broken, that's like saying the entire foundation of the empire has been shattered into a million pieces. The message couldn't be clear. The Babylonian dynasty is done, for good. Okay, so in verse 6, the poem kind of shifts gears. It's not just about what happened anymore, the fall, it's about why it feels so right. We get this chilling portrait of a cruel, relentless oppressor, and then, in this incredible turn of cosmic justice, the tables are completely flipped. The persecutor is now the one being persecuted, and there's absolutely no one around to help them.
And the language here is just so vivid, isn't it? Let's break it down. A continual stroke. That speaks to this relentless, nonstop oppression. Then you have ruled in anger, which paints this picture of a dominion that was just cruel and wrathful. And the result of all that? Well, now that same power is persecuted, and their conquerors, the Medes and Persians, are totally unstoppable. The tables haven't just turned, they've been thrown across the room. And then we get to verse 7, and the whole mood just changes on a dime. It's a dramatic shift. After all that violence and collapse, it's like the poetic camera just pulls back to show us the aftermath. And what do we see? The whole world, which had been groaning under Babylon, is suddenly at peace. It's quiet. And that quiet is finally broken, not by the sound of war, but by singing. Now, when the text says the whole earth, are we literally talking about the entire planet? Well, of course not. This is a classic, powerful literary device called hyperbole. What the whole earth really means here is the vast known world that was under Babylon's thumb. All those nations that had been crushed by its continual stroke. They can finally breathe a collective sigh of relief.
This brings us to verse 8, and honestly, this might be my favorite part of the whole passage, because the celebration becomes so big, so all-encompassing, that it actually goes beyond just people. In this beautiful use of personification, nature itself gets in on the party. The fir trees and the legendary cedars of Lebanon, they all join in the joyful song.
But that makes you stop and think for a second, right? Why on earth would trees be rejoicing? I mean, what does a forest care about the fall of a king? Well, the answer is just brilliant, because it's a metaphor that's actually rooted in literal truth. See, ancient kings, especially from Assyria and Babylon, they used to brag, like in their official records, about leveling the forests of the nations they conquered. They would clear-cut those amazing cedars of Lebanon for their massive building projects. So the king of Babylon wasn't just a metaphorical feller who cut down kingdoms, he was a literal feller, a woodcutter who cut down their forests. Now that the feller is gone, the forests, just like the people, can finally rest and grow without fear. And that, right there, is the incredible takeaway. The whole point is that the tyranny of Babylon was so awful, so destructive, that its fall wasn't just a political event. It was a cosmic one. The celebration had to be universal. It wasn't just for people. The entire created world, from the oppressed nations right down to the trees, is rejoicing that peace has finally been restored. So we end up right back where we started, with this powerful, ancient taunt song. And it leaves us with this huge, timeless question about power, doesn't it? What does it say about your empire, about your legacy, when your fall isn't mourned by anyone, but is celebrated by everyone and everything? It's a pretty sobering thought to chew on. Thanks so much for joining me for this deep dive.